Welcome to the Inner Reboot with Sam and Heidi, your weekly pit stop to shake off the stress, laugh at life's plot twists and recharge your mindset. Because let's be honest, transformation doesn't have to be boring or involve 75 different types of smoothie.
So grab a drink, smoothies if you must, and join us for the wins, the fails and the awkward bits, because sometimes the biggest breakthroughs start with an inner reboot and occasionally forgetting why you even walked into the room.
Hello,
Hello and welcome back.
how are you?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good, good. I am good. We are talking about strengths this week.
Strengths are probably favourite thing to talk about.
It's- What are strengths, though, actually?
Oh my
First
God.
question, what
Why do you
are
keep
strengths?
asking? Well, you literally
I
keep
know,
opening
because-
with these big worldly questions and I'm like, oh.
You need to do it next time. You need to think.
I need to
of
get
a
in there
question to
quicker.
ask me. You do need to get in there quicker. Your question, though, what are strengths?
Oh, what are strengths? Strengths are, as we found out more recently, and I much prefer this, they are not our skills. They are not the things that we are good at. They are the things that give us energy. And this for me has been an absolute revelation, because there are lots of things I'm good at, but bore the living hell out of me or drain me of energy. So strengths are the things that just make us feel a little bit better in life, bring us a little bit of joy, and just come naturally. That's
They
my
do come
summary of
naturally.
strengths.
Yeah, that's good. It's a good summary. They do come naturally. And yeah, I do think it's a bit deeper than what we're good at, though.
Oh,
I
go
think
for
they
it.
go a bit deeper than what we're good
Go
at.
on, hit me.
I think only because I think when you look at strengths, it's almost how do you differentiate between the things that come natural to you, the things that you've learned, versus the things that give you energy, that motivate you to keep going, that you almost do on autopilot. So it's like almost these three things, because I could easily say, oh, I learned this thing and then suddenly became really good at it, but it doesn't necessarily mean it's one of my strengths in the arena of what we talk about and identify as strengths. Does that
Yeah.
make sense?
Yeah, it does.
Because I think with, working for so long in a learning environment, well, you can really misinterpret strengths, because it's thinking, actually, I'm going to learn this new thing. So therefore you would assume I'm going to become really good at that. And now that's, in my pocket of things that I'm great at. Doesn't necessarily mean it shouldn't identify itself as your strength, but very often it can be you leaning into your strengths to be able to learn that new thing and to be able to become really good at it. So it's almost, I guess, if strengths, so then it kind of feeds into habits, doesn't it? So if strengths is the vehicle and habits are the fuel that drives the vehicle, the things that we learn, that's what underpins them.
They're the wheels.
Yes,
Maybe.
exactly. We've got really onto
Maybe.
car analogies now. Why not? Why not?
And I guess also, well, I guess, yeah, it's the strengths are sort of behind everything, aren't they? They're not the skills, they're not the knowledge. They are the behaviours and so if we list off some strengths, what we're talking about in terms of strengths, and this is why they're different from skill strengths, I think. Strengths in our language and what we now define them as are things that I guess are a bit more behaviour led. And you can think about the strengths that give you energy in terms of your habits, your behaviours, your values, and your strengths. And then the knowledge sort of sits outside of that. So how do you use all of those things to build knowledge so that then you can deliver whatever it is you want to deliver?
Yeah, so it almost becomes your sort of all singing, all dancing toolkit that you can tap into.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess there's also some of those strengths that give us energy, but actually probably we're not that good at, in terms of we're not world class at, but they really give us energy and we love doing them. And so therefore that is a strength of ours, regardless of what the output of that is. And I think they're also probably really important ones to listen to.
But how do you, this is the thing, people have said this to me before, put tools and assessments and all of that stuff to one side. How do you identify with your strengths?
That's a really good question. And I don't know if I would have been able to have done it all that well without having a tool to do it.
Mm.
Um, but there probably are some good, again, it's reflection. Like we talk about this all the time, but I think it's so important. And it doesn't have to take long, I don't think, and you can build a picture over time. But if we're from where we're coming at them from, what have you done that really gives you energy? So, for example, somebody that we did use like a test and a tool, but somebody that I was working with, and they were like, "Oh, but empathy, empathy was really low, and I didn't score very high on that. But I'm a really empathetic person."
Mhm.
And I was like, "Yeah, but does it give you energy? Do
Mm.
you thrive in those situations, or are you good at them?" And that was like the click moment. So she'd ended up, because she was empathetic and she was good at helping people because of that, but it really drained her of her energy.
Mhm.
And so I think so you could ask yourself, what are the things that you're good at, particularly like behaviors or some of those common skills that we have as humans. What are you good at? But then also, what do you really enjoy doing? Because you can be good at them, but if you don't enjoy them or they don't give you energy, or you have to work really, really hard at them, they are probably not a strength. They're probably not one of
Mm.
your top strengths.
Yeah, it's really difficult, isn't it? Because you think so. Somebody's really struggling to identify their strengths. It's almost what would you say to them? So is it that if somebody says to you, "You're really good at that," it almost raises your awareness, doesn't it? To am I?
Am I?
But yeah, so it's almost those moments of.
And that would be a strength, I think.
Yeah, I think it definitely would be a strength. And what's really interesting about your comment was the person that you knew. I had the same thing when I completed my um, assessment. It came out. People always say to me, "You're really resilient," which is really interesting. But it didn't come out as one of my strengths. It actually
Mm.
came out as one of my energy drainers. So therein too, you can be good at something, but it isn't necessarily a strength because it doesn't give you energy. But it
Yeah.
also might be something that you find yourself leaning into all of the time because of the environment that you're in and what you're dealing with, but being very unaware that actually it's an energy drainer. And I think that's really important to think about in terms of figuring out what your strengths are. So, like your friend of, but I'm really empathetic, but like you say, well, if it doesn't give you energy, then it's not necessarily a strength. And also, you wouldn't lean into it.
And then imagine if that person's then in an environment and they've specifically chosen to be in an environment where they don't have to be so empathetic all of the time. Their role changes slightly, or they specifically adapt their job so they are perhaps not supporting people as much. So maybe they are no longer a manager.
Mm,
They are no longer having to be as empathetic as often, and therefore all of a sudden they've got so much more energy to do the things that they do that
yeah.
give them energy, and will probably perform much better because they're they're not even having to choose to lean into the things that give them energy. They've got more of it by default. And
Mm,
I think for me, that was what was a real light bulb moment, is realizing that actually some of the roles I'd found myself doing were reliant really heavily on strengths that just weren't, they didn't give me energy. They were my energy drainers. So things like I
mm,
was reliant on being able to influence people, being like quite detail orientated and persuasive, and like having to be almost like project minded,
mm,
and that and results driven, and all of that stuff drains the hell out of me. But that was like 80% of what the jobs had ended up being, and I hadn't quite realised it. I'd lost. And I think this probably quite often happens, particularly if you move from like being an individual contributor or being in a specialist role to being either in a more generalist role or being a manager or becoming a leader or taking on a more senior role or a more strategic role. sometimes you can lose the tasks and the bits that really give you your energy because you just don't get to do them as much. Whereas I think if I still got to do them in the context of that more senior role, it perhaps would have been okay, but they dropped off.
Do you think that's why sometimes then people actually hate their jobs? I'm just thinking about it. Like,
Probably.
I was just listening to what you were saying, reflecting on it, and thinking, God, when you said the words detail, orientation, and persuasiveness, I was like, oh my God, no, please shoot me now. Um,
But I
that
didn't realise
literally.
like that is what my
but,
world had
but
become.
that's what I mean. Maybe that's why some people end up so unhappy in their roles, but they don't actually realise
I think
because the
particularly if
role
you look
itself
at the
is not aligned to their strengths, I guess is what I'm trying to say.
yes, and I
Mm,
think particularly if you look at like career progression, if you're staying in like this is probably a really broad statement, but probably still very true. If you are staying in the same like specialism, your technical knowledge, whatever that might be, if project manager, an engineer, a like data analyst, whatever that might be, you're staying within that track. But the more senior you get, obviously the less of that stuff you do because you're more senior and you're having to think differently, more strategically, or the role will change. And so you'll do less of that. For some people, that's probably amazing because they might have those strengths as well. Ooh. But for other people, that might just take them so far away from the core of what their strengths are and what gives them energy. And so, yeah,
yeah,
I think it is one
that's
of
a
the
really
biggest
interesting one.
challenges.
Yeah, because people very often do climb the career ladder. But the thing they loved doing was in the job that they first started doing, which actually utilised their skills and their strengths, I guess is what you're
Yeah.
saying. And then you kind of get so far away from it. Um, Yeah, but I don't think that's really interesting. Maybe we don't spend enough time reflecting on the things that do give us energy then. Because if we did, could we say, actually, everything is aligned to my strengths and I'm truly happy? Or that exercise on what are the things that I don't feel comfortable, happy, energized by? What parts of the role are that? And actually, which energy drainers am I leaning into too much?
Well, if you take, I just don't think it's a conversation that happens in
Mm-mm.
organizations at all. Like, if you think beyond our conversations, because we are practitioners and because we're coaches and because this is our world in terms of developing people, we have this awareness in this language where we can talk about this and probably look a bit more objectively at things. But even when I was in roles, that got lost in and amongst having to do your job and trying to work out what you're going to do next and whatever else. And I certainly didn't have any career based conversation or development based conversations, which were what are your strengths in terms of what gives you energy? It was like, what are your skills? Like, what are the what are the projects or what are the tasks that you want to do next? And that's all well and good, but I could define my most ideal like next step or next role, but it still rely on the wrong strengths.
Yeah,
Whereas,
because what you've just described is output focused, not input focused.
yeah,
So talking about those things like what skills do you need to fulfill this objective and this particular project, that's all output focused. None of it is input. And I think the strengths part is the bit where you get to focus on the input.
well, and how you're going to do it. Like, how am
Yeah.
I going to do that job? Because that's like, yeah, you're so right. And it's what skills do I need to deliver this job? Oh, great. I need all of my skills that I'm good at in terms of my profession and my technical knowledge. And I've got all of those. And then it's, oh, but actually, in order to even be able to do that, I've got to create a really good project brief and I've got to be really detailed focused and I've got to persuade 10 stakeholders to buy into this thing and then I can do it. Well, I'm going to be so fucked by the time I actually get to deliver it because I'm so drained by this bit. And
Mm.
9 times out of 10, there's a lot that you don't have control over either. So I don't even think it's as simple as is. No, it's not rocket science. It's not hard, but I think we, like you say, really easily look at the job and the tasks
Mhm.
and the project work and all of that stuff. And we don't ever like, I've never been to an interview process and questioned like how I'm going to be able to actually do that thing
Yeah.
because that would be really important now. thinking about it.
Yeah, it's always tell us a time when you did a thing. It's not like, how did you get to that point? Or,
Yeah, and if
yes,
in interviews you was able to really explore, not even interviews, but like if talking about your job, you're really able to explore how you're going to do something and what the challenges might be and what do you need in order to deliver your role, I would probably be able to identify now that I would have to use a lot of skills and strengths that just kill me, like that would be so exhausting and really draining.
the interesting activity. If you looked at a job description, the job that you're going to apply for, what if you only ever applied for the jobs that linked to your strengths and gave you energy? You'd probably never apply for any because
Well,
I'm
no, but
not
this
overly convinced that it's easy either to identify what strengths match up to that particular role. Sometimes it is, not saying every time, but I think
oh, it's about
quite a
context. It's about
yeah,
environment. Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
exactly. And quite a lot of the time, I think it's very difficult to, if you're seeking for a career path or a specific route, it's very hard to start identifying how do I link my strengths up with that so that I know that when I'm doing this, I'm going to be really energized and really positive. Because let's not forget either, a lot of this sits in well-being as well when we think
Hmm.
about burnout. So actually, there's many reasons for burnout, but some of the reasons can be because you're leaning into the strengths that give you drain your energy, um, and therefore the job becomes much harder because it's not your natural way of being. And then burnout increases, and then well-being becomes affected. And there's so many reasons why knowing your strengths is really important.
Well, yes, and I think what you've just sparked me, I think to make it not doom and gloom for everybody, like is
Sorry about
no,
that.
no, 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 not at all, because I think this is really important. Like, no, I don't think I would change the way I apply for jobs based on what I know about my strengths because it's still so much based on your skill, right? Like
Mhm.
generally applying for jobs, doing the job, etc., is based on your skill. I think by knowing your strengths, you can ask much more informed questions at like the interview process or when you're in a job and potentially you're looking for a promotion or you want to take on a new project or whatever that might be. If you know your strengths, you can be more informed about those conversations.
Mhm.
But I also think it's really important to understand and reflect on as soon as you're aware of your strengths, the ones that give you energy, so your actual strengths, and the ones that drain you of energy, because like there's still those things. So detail orientation, yes, it drains me of energy, but I still have to do it. Like I can't ignore the 12 strengths that drain me of energy and just go through life not having to use them. Um, Probably wish I could most of the
That'd be
time,
great, wouldn't it?
but I can't.
I was thinking of that, like, oh, that would be nirvana.
I know, imagine. Um, but that's just not reality for anybody at all. And so what else you can do is be aware of when you're going to need those to use those strengths when they play out and what happens. So how often in your job are you doing those things that drain you? And how do you help them have less impact? So does that mean a lot of reframing? So for example, how could you reframe having to create a load of detail orientated stuff um, and lean on another strength? Like there's ways of doing
Mm.
that. How could you perhaps get some support from somebody else and be like, this is going to really drain me, but I know you'll be able to do it in half an hour and it'll be fine for you. Like, so
Yeah.
there's also this knowledge of how can I dial up my strengths that give me energy to counterbalance the ones that don't,
Mhm.
but how can I reframe? And not the only, but a really recent one, literally this week of reframing that has been really helpful for me is, and we talked about this in the goal setting one, and setting goals have just been hell for me forever, but I still keep trying to do them and I still, because it's the right thing to do, right? How am I meant to progress in life if I don't set goals? Like that limiting belief one, number one. Um, but I still need goals of some sort. I can't just ignore them because I don't want to ignore them completely. But then literally I got my strengths book out and I was like, oh, okay, like I hate being detail orientated. I'm not very decisive. And there was another one in there. So no wonder why writing a goal in the first place is really difficult. But I do love being creative, and I love going with the flow, and I love seeing where the world takes me, and I'm really compassionate and empathetic. So if those are my strengths, let's think of ambition rather than a goal, and let's just track the journey. Let's work out what happens as we go along, and know that I will, because I'm following my interests, the goals will happen. I just don't have to have them really regimented and rigid, which is where I've gone wrong and not trusted myself. Like, I've not trusted myself to achieve things unless I've got this really formulaic goal
Mm.
approach. And so that also not it's reframing how I think about goals so that I can use them based on my strengths. Because it's still a goal
Yeah.
ultimately. It's just a different
I hate the
reframing.
word goal.
I know.
Yeah, it petrifies me. It's almost like purpose though, isn't it, actually? Where are you going? What's your journey? What's your purpose? Um, it's kind of the way that I look at it a bit more, and it's much easier to align my strengths to that. Um, And I find something that you said was quite interesting around, I'm trying to do this, I'm trying to do that. And then you looked at your strengths over and realised that you'd shoehorned yourself into all of your energy drainers, which is really,
I
is a
know.
really interesting activity to do. And I actually haven't done that, to be fair. I haven't looked at my energy drainers for a long time. And I know I need to revisit them.
They're probably
And it's
just as
those moments
important,
in
if
time
not.
actually when I feel a bit muddled and I feel a bit like, actually, what am I doing? Which is why I come back to that word purpose. I feel like the activities that I do have to have purpose because they need to go somewhere,
Yeah.
aka reach a goal. Um, yeah, it's an interesting one though.
It is, because for somebody else whose strengths are results focused, that was the other one. Like, it's really weird. Like, I have to achieve stuff and be able to tick stuff off, but I'm not results focused in terms of like the detailed results. Like, I don't care about them. And there's another. So, like, for example, if your strength that gives you energy is detail orientation, like an analytical and results driven, you would probably want your goals absolutely mapped out and be able to track them and analyze them and understand exactly where you are and what's happening. And I think that's why awareness before you do anything is so important, because we get so much information and are overloaded with information, and
Mm,
it's so easy to be like, oh, well, that's what's expected of me. That person's doing that makes sense. I'll do
mm,
that. And then actually it might not make sense for you as an
mm.
individual.
I think understanding your strengths individually is obviously step one. But the other thing as well, if you work within a team, I think it's really, really important to understand everybody else's strengths that you're working with, because it's almost like a cheat sheet of, if you know your strengths and you know your energy drainers, like you said earlier, if you were asked to do something, you might say, actually, that's one of my energy drains. I can do it. However, X, Y,
Mm,
Z. If you understand the rest of your team strengths and you know that there's somebody within the team that has that as a strength, but for you it's an energy drainer, you can lean into them. And I think that's sometimes the bit that's really missing in,
yeah.
with people. It's one thing to understand your own, but I think to create that high performance kind of culture and arena, you have to understand everybody's. And when you look at the strength scope, the four areas, you might have a group of people that are really high in that kind of empathy, collaboration type arena, and then not many people that are across in the sort of analytical, data driven, results driven arena. So then you can manage, workflows accordingly.
I think as well, it gives you a language, like within your
Mm,
team, and like all of a sudden you're able to, as an individual, because you've got the team awareness, to be able to advocate for yourself as well and be like, hang on a minute, like, I know I've done this for a long time, and because you all think I'm really good at it, but it drains me and I hate it and it takes me a day to recover. So can we just rethink this, please? And then you've got somebody else over in the corner that's like, well, I absolutely love doing this and it's my strength, and like, I
But
get
I
loads of
wonder if you
energy
did
from it.
that, how many people in that team would go, "What? You hate doing that? You're so great at that."
I
That's the
know.
thing. And that's very often why it's very difficult for people to identify their own strengths, because you're hearing all of this stuff around you. You're brilliant at that. You're really good. I love the way that you do this. I wish I could do more of what you do. You often hear that,
Yeah.
I wish I could do more of that. Not knowing actually that, so then maybe
It's
are
interesting that
we, no, but are we put into a false sense of security that we think we know our strengths
we actually
based on other
don't.
people's
Feedback.
version of us, whereas actually they might not be our strengths. I wonder how many people go around on the day to day in their work actually in energy drainer mode
Yeah.
because they're being seen as this person that's really good at this particular thing.
Also, what you made me think about was like, when, because we all do it and go, oh my God, I wish I could do that. Or I wish like I was able to do that. Do I actually wish that I could do that? And would that give me energy? Or do I just think that that is the thing that would make me better at, do you know what I mean? Like,
Yeah.
because if we all wish we could do everything better, where's our uniqueness and how we're then just doing more of the things that probably don't give us energy anyway. So we're spreading ourselves even
Mm.
thinner. But I know that I do that all the time. Like, it's almost like that's really cool. God, I wish I could do that. And then if you're not careful, you go, I do this all the time with hobbies on Instagram. You go and invest time in it. And then you're just like, what am I doing this for? Why am I doing this? I don't need to do it because I don't need to do everything.
Yeah, I think but there's a lot of stuff available, isn't there? That's why
I
as
know.
well. There's loads out there. And I think especially if you're quite creative, I can definitely get on that train of like trying new things too quickly and then moving on to the next thing, which sort of I then irritate myself. And it's not that I don't have staying power, I do, but what I find really hard is the thing that I actually want to stick with. That's the problem. Like you tried 10 different things and I'm like, well, I don't actually really like any of them, so I'll
I don't
just
want to
keep
do any of
moving on.
these.
Um, but yeah, I wonder whether it's almost that the other question is once you've started to identify your strengths, then what? What do you do?
Well, for
Like,
me, it was a
do
catastrophic
you,
light bulb moment where I was like, "Oh my God, send me into an existential crisis." So don't do that. Is what I would suggest.
um, it is an interesting thing though, isn't it? What will you lean into more? So first off, what are the things that give you energy and what will you lean into more? I think are the two things that I took from what do you do with strengths once you've identified them?
Mine was probably more of the opposite. Mine was more, these are really draining me, and I need to do something about that.
Right.
Because my strengths, which do give me, I was just in an environment and a role and I guess a situation where I couldn't I couldn't lean into my strengths. Like, it just wasn't possible as much as I
Mm,
needed to. Like, I could, but it was probably balanced 20%, 80% the wrong way. And
mm,
there was no way to make it right. And so whilst I couldn't necessarily fix that in the moment, it helped me see things much clearer in terms of what I would do as my next step.
mm.
But it could also give you that real awareness. Even if it does do that, it does give you that awareness to advocate for what you need, but also look for how you can adapt that. Because for some people, they will be able to adapt that and they'll just sort of have fallen into it and be able to have those conversations. Um, and I think it's about whether you lean into your strengths more or whether you look at your energy drainers and you need to minimize them. That is what you do with it, isn't it? It's like, right, okay, what is this
Mm.
telling me in terms of how well balanced things are and how much I need to
Yeah,
change?
I think balance is the key word there because there are some danger zones with it. So thinking actually identifying your energy drain is definitely and recognizing when you kind of need to stop, leaning into your strengths definitely, but then there's that danger zone of actually them becoming shadow strengths where you've overdone a strength and it almost becomes a burden. Like somebody could have one of their strengths could be empathy. Um, and if overdone,
Everyone
it
gets really pissed off.
yeah, no, it's almost that you take on because you're onboarding the other person. So say you're a really empathetic person and you are seen as that person that somebody can go and talk to and offload and share their problems, etc. And that genuinely does give you energy, and that's absolutely fine. But if you do it too much, it becomes a shadow strength. But the reason it becomes a shadow strength is because you're onboarding all of their problems.
Mm.
So there is a danger zone with some of the strengths if you lean into them too much.
Well, I think that's the case with all of them, because I think empathy,
Yeah.
if you do that too much, not only that is in the impact on you, but the impact on other people as well. Because if you're always being empathetic and that's not what they need, that's going to become a problem.
Hmm.
But also, say if you take compassion, like that's one of my strengths. If I'm over compassionate to people all of the time, I will just become really like, oh my God, like I give me some fun stuff. But also, people will probably be like, come on, can we move? Like, I don't need you to be compassionate all the time. Like, I need you to be
Yeah.
like a bit of a, like, you don't always want to go to that person for that same thing, do you? Either because you need
No.
a bit of energy or you need a bit of fun
Yeah.
or you just want some light relief or whatever. And the same thing with take detail orientation. If that was one of my strengths and then I was using that too much or that was becoming overpowering, I could become too detail focused that I then miss like the bigger picture
Miss a detail.
or miss the detail. Absolutely not. No details being missed there. But you could focus on it when it really doesn't need to be focused on. And
Yeah,
then that
mine I
becomes
think is
draining.
the one that jumps out to me is always collaboration, because I'm like, what if collaboration is overdone all of the time?
Well, then it
No one's ever going to
becomes
make a bloody decision, so
no,
nothing
and
would
it
ever get
becomes
done
like
anyway.
decision by committee, doesn't it? Because you turn into a committee rather than
Yeah,
collaboration.
exactly. So there are there's definitely some danger zones amongst all that. Um, I think some myths as well around strengths are quite interesting. I saw something the other day and it said you need to work on, if you know what your strengths are, then you need to work on your weaknesses. And I was like, what?
Oh, no,
Ah,
no,
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 that
no.
doesn't make any sense to me at all.
No, I fully agree. I think the world would be a much better place, and I think workplaces would be incredible. And just in life, like school, think back to school. Like, if I was encouraged to really, really hone in on the subjects I was good at and just sort of leave the ones that are not leave them and completely like mess them up, but like if it was okay to just bumble along on those and just pass and put
Mm.
your energy in the things that you're really good at, imagine like I could have got 5 A stars and 5 C's instead of getting everything like B across the board. Do you know what I
Yeah,
mean? And that
yeah,
might have
yeah,
gave me a better insight into what I wanted to
yeah.
do. And it's the same at work, I think. Like we're really easy to be like, can I have some constructive feedback? Can I know where my gaps are and fill them? Well, actually somebody else can probably fill that gap. So wouldn't I be so
Mm.
much better really focusing on the things that I am naturally really good at and that I really enjoy?
Hmm.
And so I fully agree. I think the focus on your weakness thing is a bit of a I listened to a podcast the other week, and I can't remember who it was. It was like a comedy podcast, but this somebody contacted. He was a drummer in a band, and just like out of the blue was like, "Oh, how's things? What have you been doing?" He was like, "Getting better at drumming," and he was like a world class drummer. But he was
Yeah.
like, "I'm just going to get better at drumming. I'm
Mm.
not going to try and play the guitar or try and do anything else. I'm just going to like this is my craft, and I'm going to hone that in." And that really stuck with me because I was like, "Yeah, yeah, like
But
what?"
that is how people become experts in their areas, like golf or football or whatever. It's complete submersion, is it, all of the time of just constantly honing your craft because it's the thing that gives you energy. But you're right, we do. I mean, the education whole thing is like a whole other topic, but I do find it really interesting. And I think the whole connected learning thing is really interesting as well. And that sits within that around what are you connected to? What are the things that you're really
Mm.
good at and get even better at them is so important. Yeah.
Yeah, I think so. And I think it would I think if most conversations in the workplace in terms of like performance or development or growth and just day-to-day conversations had a strengths lens on them,
Yes. Yeah.
it would be incredible.
It would make a massive difference, I think, to the individual,
Yeah, I
because you
agree.
then feel, me personally as an individual, I think I would feel heard and understood rather than being shoehorned into goals and objectives that I haven't created. They're put upon you. as a individual or a team, we need to achieve XYZ, which I completely get because that's why you're in the role. That's the purpose that the role is there. But I think to be part of that and feel completely encompassed and inclusive in it is I would feel very heard and understood if my manager kind of was like, so, let's find out what your strengths are and, what really energizes you and what are some of the things that, drain your energy. Because as a manager and leader as well, you need to know these things.
Mm.
Otherwise, how are you going to truly know and be able to lead your people through times, through sort of times of challenge or change, for example?
Well, and also then that is just immediately putting the focus on, we've got to do this thing. Like these are our KPIs objectives. We've got to achieve them. But
Yeah,
how are you going to be able to do that successfully for you? Not for
yeah,
me, not for that person over there, but for you as an individual. And that's where your strengths can really come to light. And I think, yeah, you're right. Like, and it's not a big conversation.
no,
It's helping people understand how they can do that in the best way for them.
definitely. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it is harder without doing a tool. I in terms of identifying your strengths, but I do
Mm.
think just trying to think about takeaways, like really easy takeaways. I think if you,
Yeah.
in the moments during your week, think about, or if something, there's a challenge or a barrier or something happens, then you can reflect on it and be like, hmm, did I enjoy that? Am I good at it? Did it give me energy?
Hmm.
Or am I spending a lot of time doing things that I know drain me?
And also, onboarding other people's feedback of you. If somebody's recently said
Yes.
to you, actually, you're so good at that, actually really think about that. Think
Yeah.
about the thing that they've said that you're good at, really reflect on it and figure out whether it gave you energy or whether it drained your energy. So that's when you can really start to uncover, actually, I can do this, but it's an energy drainer. But
And
in
you can,
others, it's recognized as a strength, which is a really interesting activity to do.
yeah, and you can really do that. One really easy way to do that is to think about when somebody comes to you and says, "Oh, can you do this thing?" What's your immediate reaction? If your immediate reaction is, "Oh
Mm.
my God, not that again," like probably tells you everything you need to know. If your immediate reaction is, "Absolutely, yes, I will make space for that, like I'll prioritize it," or that just fills me with joy,
Yeah,
it's
excites you.
probably,
It's
yeah,
almost that moment of like, I cannot wait to crack on with that. I'm so
yeah,
excited. Yeah, that's definitely a strength.
yeah. Yes, indeed. So a bit of, yeah, just playing around with it, I think, and working out. And I don't think there's any right or wrong, but
Mm-mm.
they are a bit like your behaviours and your values. Like they don't really change.